Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel here and welcome to the Highland greenhouse where I'm sitting right now. I have a plant spotlight to share with you guys, but this plant actually does not grow in this greenhouse. Where it grows is the little tiny Mediterranean tent that sits next to this greenhouse. There's not really room to film back in that corner, so we're in here instead. But the species I'm sharing with you guys is a plant from the Mediterranean habitat of southwestern Australia. I've touched on a couple different species in this group before, ones that are a little bit easier to grow even than this one. This is what I would consider the easiest to grow of the rosetted tuberous sundews, and that is Drosera tubaestylis. Now you can see these guys, they're just starting to grow up. Only the first couple have started blooming. Most of the plants here are actually, they're just starting to come out, produce their little buds above the soil right now. And so this entire pot will be filled with a colony of plants within within the next month or so, give or take. But right now, we have the very first plants that are actually starting to come up and produce their rosettes and their flowers. So Drosera tubaestylis is a relatively widespread species as far as the tuberous sundews go. It's found from roughly around the region of Perth, southward to the very cape of southwest Australia, and then there's also a couple of populations found inland further eastward. So it's a relatively widespread plant, and it likes to grow in, like most of the tuberous sundews, relatively sandy soils, but these guys in particular like to grow in the bottoms of winter wet depressions. So places where when it rains in winter, the soil becomes absolutely saturated wet and sometimes even flooded. So these guys, they will grow in moderately moist soils, but during winter, they will actually often grow in places that are just absolutely sopping wet in nature. Now, they don't get very big, as you can see. They will get a little bit larger than this, but again, these are flowering size plants, so a full-grown rosette of these guys will average between 1 and maybe for a really big one, 2 inches across. They have leaves that are kind of oblong to oval shaped. Sometimes they're wider than they are long, like on these guys right now. Other populations may be more long than they are wide. So it's kind of a variable species. One of the key characteristics of this species is that down the middle of the leaf, I will show it in a close-up here, they have kind of a raised midrib that runs right along the middle of the leaf, about anywhere between a third to half the length of the leaf. It's very obvious. And then after that, the leaf is just broad and flat all around. The coloration of these guys also varies a little bit. They can be almost pure green, especially if they're growing in a more shaded location, to very red-edged, bright scarlet tentacles, and sometimes red running up along that midrib, but otherwise green. Or you may have populations that just turn solid blood red all the way through, especially, again, if they're growing in a full sun area. So sunlight will affect the color, as it does with most plants. But these guys, again, they start out, they will produce a rosette between 3 and 8 leaves right at the start of the growing season, and at about the same time, they'll have 1 to several stalks that come up, completely glabrous, usually 2 to 3 inches tall, maybe a little shorter like on these guys right now. And they have a single flower on each of those stalks. Very long, thin sepals. And then when the plant, or when that stalk, the bud on the end is ready to open, it opens out into approximately 1/2 to 3/4 inch wide, pure white flower. It's got oval petals, and this species does grow sympatric with a couple other rosetted species, some of them quite similar in appearance. That midrib is one way to tell the difference between the two. The other main way to tell the difference between the two, however, and it's going to be really hard to see in the close-up even, is that if you were to look at the styles, the very tip of the stigmas on top of the ovary here, there's a whole bunch of them, and they're all trumpet-shaped, and they're kind of clustered in a little hat on top of the ovary. And they exist in kind of a semicircle pattern there, very densely packed. And so that arrangement and their coloration from white to beige or purplish is kind of a distinctive trait of this species. Now, these guys don't self-pollinate. They require cross-pollination with another clone in order to actually produce seeds. So because these guys, each flower only opens for one day, and luckily, unlike some other sundews, they do tend to open all day long. So right from morning until the sun goes down, they're open. They have to wait for a pollinator to come from a relatively far distance, some other clone somewhere else, bring pollen in, pollinate them, and then take their pollen to the next plant again. And so seeds oftentimes aren't necessarily heavily produced by these plants, particularly because the other way these guys propagate is via daughter tuber cloning. So, like all tuberous sundews, when these guys dry out in summer, because those winter wet depressions, they may be sopping wet in winter, but by the time summer comes around, they become bone dry, almost no moisture left whatsoever, except for way down deep in the soil. So they produce their little 1/4 to 1/2 inch tubers down 2-3 inches in the soil, and after they've taken the energy from their original tuber and grown out, made their new rosette and everything, started catching food, once they've regrown their own tuber, they'll start to send out stolons within the soil that will actually go out an inch or two, maybe 3 inches, and plant themselves and grow a second tuber. And each plant, if that's doing really well, may produce 3, 4, 5 of those little stolons, produce several tubers in a year. And then the next season, or sometimes even at the end of that first season, those tubers will sprout their own rosettes, and so you'll develop a colony over time. And so one tuber can eventually, given a few years, spread through a range of 2, 3, 4 feet in diameter. All the exact same genetic clone, multiple rosettes. So if they are not able to produce seeds to be able transported elsewhere via wind and water, they can at least then rely on propagating themselves via clonal methods so that they can continue to keep growing on until they do get to produce seeds. So, but again, they grow only during the winter season, when it's wet, when it's cool. They will grow preferably in fairly open locations, full sun, but they grow during a period of the year when it's a relatively short photo period, and that becomes important when we're dealing with cultivation later. As things dry out and warm up and the day lengths become longer, they will completely die back until there is absolutely nothing left on the surface that's evident of them. Their dead, dried leaves will break off and rot away and disappear relatively quickly because they're quite soft, they're quite delicate once they're dried out. Now, in cultivation, tuberous sundews in general are not the easiest of the sundews to grow. You do have to get their conditions pretty on point in order for them to truly be happy. And from my experience at least, this may differ with other people, but the rosetted tuberous sundews are some of the hardest of the tuberous to grow well. For whatever reason, they're a lot pickier. It's hard to get them to produce a nice, healthy tuber. But this is one exception to that rule. This tubaestylis pot I have had going for 4, 5, 6 years now, something like that. I'd have to look back exactly when I first got them. But they just keep going. They're a lot less picky about exact soil conditions. I haven't had the greatest soil for a couple of these pots for a little bit of while. They've recently been repotted into better soil, so I'm hoping they do even better now. But even when it was crappier soil, a lot of tannic acid buildup in it, they will still tolerate that. They'll keep growing as long as they're fed well. So this is a great plant to start if you want to get into tuberous sundews and you don't want to grow something like peltata or hookeri or auriculata, which are some of the easy climbing species out there and some of the first ones that most people will encounter. So for a rosetted one, this is a great start. You want to grow them, like most of the other tuberous sundews, in a minimum of a 2-to-1 perlite or sand and peat mix. Nice, loose, well-draining, very gritty, grainy soil so that water runs through relatively quickly, but does hold on enough to that material to keep these guys moist and happy during their winter growing season. So, nice, loose soil. During winter, of course, you can set this in a tray of water and just leave it wet until they start dying back. In summer, take it out and let it dry out. Once it's completely dry, you maybe spritz it a little bit every once a week, give or take, especially in a large pot like this. The bigger it is, the less often you have to give any moisture because it'll retain that longer. And you want to give them as strong a light as possible, particularly because in winter you're going to be giving them a relatively short photo period. During summer they may experience up to 15 hours of sun a day, but in winter it may be as little as 8 to 10 hours of sunlight a day, and you want to try and match that. Otherwise, longer photo periods may actually trigger them to go dormant too soon. And you don't want that because then they won't have built up the energy reserves they need to have a nice healthy tuber. So you keep them on a short photo period but under very strong lights, the strongest LEDs you can get. If you have an environment where you can have them either outside or in a sun exposed like sunroom or something, that will be best for them. Stronger the better. The redder they are, the happier they'll be. So you can use that kind of as a gauge. It does depend on what clone you have because, again, some of them stay a lot more green than others, but if they have the nice red tentacles, then you're probably on point. With these guys, like most tuberous sundews, you want to feed them relatively frequently as well. A lot of other carnivorous plants, they may not be too sensitive about not getting fed very often because they're adapted really to live on very scant amounts of food, fertilizer, nutrients, whatever that they capture through their leaves throughout the year. With these guys, they are designed to kind of be a little bit gluttonous during their growing season. So once they appear, once they start having those sticky leaves, start feeding them. A nice, relatively urea-free liquid fertilizer works. If you have dried bloodworms or fruit flies, or if you happen to catch flies and stuff around the house, feed that to them. And you want to do that fairly regularly. If it produces a new leaf, give that leaf a couple of small food bits so that you build up their energy and allow them to grow. And that will also, if you feed them enough, allow them to produce their daughter tubers and give you a colony that will spread and become a lot more impressive over time. Now, if you have these plants flowering, generally, it's just going to be a pretty thing for you to look at. Certainly, it's not going to be enough to worry about. You don't need to cut off the flower to conserve energy or anything, but you're not going to get seeds from them unless you have a second clone of the species. Now, if you do, then lucky you, you can cross them and you'll probably get seeds pretty easily after that, because as long as it's a different clone, they'll take right away. And when these guys flower and they actually are done flowering, you may notice this one down here is already done flowering and the scape is actually lengthened. It's gotten longer than when it was standing upright. So that is actually putting the little flower bud and eventually the seed pod, if it's been pollinated, out past the rosette. So they lay flat against the soil, but they want to not be stuck right against the leaves because when they release those seeds, they want those to spread and not just stay stuck right next to them. So they actually extend their flower stalks after blooming. They lengthen to get out past the rosette. And the further away for them, the better, because then the more likely it is that those seeds will go beyond where the colony is and actually establish a new colony somewhere else. So if you get seeds, they're also not going to be the easiest to germinate necessarily. You have some species like peltata and gracilis and hookerai and stuff that you just sow them on the soil surface at the right time of year in fall and leave them and they'll do their thing. With these guys, it's a little bit more difficult. With a lot of tuberous sundews, actually, it's a lot more difficult. Seeds may require scarification, taking a bit of sandpaper and very gently rubbing the seeds on that to remove just the outer surface of the seed coat so that water can get in during the summer stratification period. Because that's another thing with these guys. They're probably going to need some sort of warm summer period to break down some of the dormancy inhibitors or germination inhibitors that keep the seeds dormant during summer. So they need to be kept in a warm location. You can have some moisture there that helps get things in there to break down those inhibitors. But that may take 1 year and you start getting sprouts the next fall, or it may take 2 or 3 years sometimes to get them to sprout. Whether gibberellic acid treatments work on these guys is still kind of up in the air. For some species it seems to, other species it doesn't. Again, I only have the one clone of these guys, so I don't have seeds to actually test with. So I'm not sure how they will react to gibberellic acid, but a low concentration of that for 24 to 48 hour soakings of the seeds, and you might also be able to trigger them to germinate. Again, you may want to double check other resources from people who have had experience with seeds for whether or not that's accurate. Other species can be even more difficult. Now, these guys in the wild, they are also a fire-adapted species, like pretty much everything in that area is. During the summer, fires come through and burn off all the dead, dry vegetation, and the ash will get into the soil, and once the rains come through, that'll water that into the soil, and the chemicals released by the fire in that ash will also help break down germination inhibitors. So if you have access to smoke water or smoke-infused paper that you can soak in water and then soak the seeds for these guys in, that may also be another trick to help germinate these guys. There are some places that will also, it's debatable how well it often works, but the liquid smoke that you get for flavoring meats at a grocery store, you can also use that. Or you can go the fun but slightly risky route of setting your own grass fire to get these guys to germinate. You have the seeds on the soil surface, dampen the soil a little bit, cover that with a small pile of dry grass, and light it on fire. And just as it gets to burning about half of that away, you cover it, and then you keep that covered so that it smothers the fire, makes everything nice and smoky, and that gets into the soil, and then you water the ashes in. That will also help trigger. Now, hopefully, if you can get those seeds to sprout, you get tiny little seedlings that after 1 or 2 years will get up to their usual 1.5, maybe 2-inch size if you've got a big clone. And you can have a brand new lineage of tubaestylis to go from. Now, this is probably one of the easiest species that you will find for sale in cultivation, again, because it's an easy species to grow relative to most other tuberous species. They propagate relatively quickly from tubers, so you can usually pick up tubers for maybe 15 to 20 bucks a tuber online, particularly in mid to late summer when people are actually digging up, harvesting the extra tubers, putting them away for temporary storage until fall. So keep an eye out. You may be able to find this species and grow it out for yourself. Now, that is all I have for that species right now. There are a couple more tuberous plants that are starting to come up that will hopefully get into flowering within the next couple months. And I would like to do some spotlights of those guys as well. But we will also be moving on to some of the plants here in the Highland greenhouse as well, and maybe a few more butterworts that are also in the Mediterranean greenhouse. So stay tuned. You may see those coming up on the channel in the next few months. But until then, if you enjoy educational videos, how-tos and stuff like that, like this, there are several more plant spotlights already on the channel here, so you can go check those out. Leave a like if you enjoyed this, share it if you know somebody else who would like to learn, subscribe if you'd like to see the things that are coming up, and turn on the black bell so you don't miss anything. If you have questions or comments, something that I might have missed, certainly leave them in the comments below the video here. And you can also find more information at my website, carltoncarnivores.com, where the blog and database files on the plants and animals that I work with or just enjoy learning about that are up there for people to read and peruse through. I am also always posting photos and video tidbits and such on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc. at Carlton Carnivores. If you would like to help support in a more financial manner, because making and editing these videos are expensive, either directly financially or taking up time to do them, you can buy some of the plants that I usually have available on my website shop. Or there's also merchandise there and such. Or you can become a Patreon member, where you can get early access to these videos, access to the monthly seed contests that I do, releasing things that either may not be on the website, or you get it at the reduced cost of whatever you choose to support as. Or you can also, for as little as a cup of coffee's worth, do a donation at ko-fi.com. The links for these things will be in the video description below. But until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.